our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. It was a busy day in the Alabama Legislature on this, the 11th day of the 2023 regular session. And that was especially the case in the House of Representatives. Members worked through a calendar of 17 bills. Here are the highlights. House Bill 164 from State Representative Andy Witt requires public schools to adopt financial literacy into their courses of study. Witt and several other members argued that too many students are going out into the real world without basic knowledge it takes to make sound financial decisions.
HB 164 is known as Financial Literacy Bill. This bill will require public school students complete a course of personal financial literacy and money management before graduation. The instruction will include the following topics and will be incorporated into existing classes such as career prep or math classes as determined by the State Department of Education. These skill sets will be incorporated into an existing test that will be developed again by the State Department of Education. Proficiency now will be monitored and reported back on a yearly basis.
That bill passed unanimously and now goes to the Senate. House Bill 30 from State Representative A.J. McCampbell removes the term failing school from the state's public school grading system. First intended as an accountability measure, the term has become problematic in recent years, as some percentage of the state's schools would always be dubbed as failing even if they made improvements.
You asked the question, why are we doing this? It is an opportunity for us to give a positive spin, and in terms of actually growing business in Alabama, whenever somebody is standing off in wherever we go to recruit and they see that term failing, it's a defeatist term, so we need to do better here in Alabama, and that's what this bill will do.
That bill passed unanimously and also goes to the Senate. House Bill 43 from State Representative Peblin Warren would require students to either attend kindergarten or demonstrate readiness before attending first grade. Warren has been working on this legislation for years and now has the support of Governor Kay Ivey.
Hopefully for all of our new members, you will understand the importance of what we're trying to do here. This bill is what we refer to as a first grade readiness bill. What we're trying to do is to make sure when a student reaches the first grade, they have the minimum competence that they could get in kindergarten before entering the first grade.
That bill passed 87-12 and now goes to the Senate. The House also took up the more controversial issue of transgender athletes. Last year, the legislature passed a law requiring that K-12 students could only compete in sports as the gender they were assigned at birth. House Bill 261 from State Representative Susan DuBose would extend that requirement to the state's colleges and universities. DuBose argued the bill is about preserving girls' and women's access to fair competition, while some Democrats argued the measure was unnecessary. This one didn't line up neatly along party lines, though, as even some Democrats spoke in favor of DuBose's bill.
Well, it's based on the biological definition that the doctor determines at that time. And it's based on the biological definition, which could include chromosomal as well, but it's genetics and biology, science determines your sex. So it's based on your sex.
It is almost like we are stopping some sort of epidemic in Alabama that is occurring, and I'm not sure that anybody in here can find one example of this ever happening in the state of Alabama.
Well, it's happening nationwide, and there's no reason to think that it could not happen here. We don't want it to happen even one time.
Well, no, I mean, it doesn't happen often because it's not happening as we've described it here, because the NCAA and many other organizations have adopted their own rules in regards to dealing with this. This is just an opportunity for people to create an issue or a solution that is looking for a problem.
A man is physically stronger than a woman. And that's Bible. And so it's important to make sure that we protect our baby daughters.
That bill passed 83-5 with several Democrats abstaining. Things were mostly quiet in the Senate today as they completed housekeeping work. However, members did react to the Dadeville shooting. State Senator Jay Hovey, who represents Dadeville, was first to the podium.
I've been honored to get to know the good people of Dadeville and Tallapoosa County over the last year, and my heart goes out to the entire community in the wake of these tragic events. People are going to try to politicize this event, as so many others that break our hearts. But I'm going to tell you now, and you'll hear me say over and over again over the next years that we work together, that we're never going to be able to legislate morality. The evil in this world that continues to devastate our communities across the country can only be defeated in the hearts and minds and homes and churches in these communities. There'll be discussions on this floor and in legislative bodies across this country about the responsibility of legislators. And while, of course, we have the responsibility to do everything we can to protect our communities, this war will only be won by changing hearts.
State Senator Marika Coleman has been outspoken in favor of stricter gun control laws. She disagreed with Hovey's assessment from the floor.
The bill that I have would, in my opinion at this point, would not have prevented what happened in Dadeville, but it's a tool in the toolbox that law enforcement can have to get guns out of people's hands who pose to be a threat to themselves or others. Senate Bill 126, we refer to them as red flag legislation. Again, they are bipartisan, or I would even say nonpartisan. Other conservative states, in response to a mass shooting, have had to pass these. Just last week, I was saying that I hope that we don't have to do something in response to a mass shooting. And then Dadeville happened.
Sadly, there is not much to update from Dadeville, but police continue to ask for information, especially photos or videos from those who may have attended the party where the shooting occurred. The FBI has established a new digital tip line that allows anyone to anonymously submit files. That's tips.fbi.gov/digital media. Outside of the State House, it was National Lineman Appreciation Day. Not the football kind, but rather the professionals who build and repair our power lines. The Energy Institute of Alabama hosted a special event today in Montgomery honoring linemen for the difficult and dangerous work they perform.
As you see electricity becoming more and more ubiquitous everywhere, everything we touch, every device we use is powered by electricity, people often forget how hard it is to generate electricity and how dangerous the job is. And so while at EIA we do great things like work with Senator Weaver to celebrate you and the work you do, we also work with the legislature to pass bills that protect linemen who have to go into somebody's yard, and you may deal with an unruly homeowner who's not happy or a dog. We work hard to make sure that you are properly protected.
We work long hours. It's tough sometimes. You may be at a son or daughter's ball game cheering or whatever. Get that call, you got to leave. Not every time can we leave, but most times we do have to leave. And we may sit out there for 10, 15 hours. We're tired. We're hungry. All we want to do is get home, get a bath, and see our family. But the lineman side of it, what I like best is the reward. When I leave, I know that now I've gained respect, trust with that member, and I know that there's a relationship there that they know that if they call, we're going to come no matter what.
We'll be right back with tonight's guests.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org.
Joining me next is State Senator Chris Elliott from Baldwin County. Senator, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
You are involved in a lot of very topical issues right now this session, but also some stemming from the last couple of sessions. We reported on this police jurisdiction situation. You passed legislation a couple of years ago, essentially wanting these cities, towns and cities, to report on the taxes they're collecting, fees and fines and things like that. But it came with a big catch that if they didn't report to the state, what they're collecting, that they could no longer operate those or no longer collect fees and fines and taxes in those areas. And there were quite a bit. I think 128 that didn't. So that means that goes away. Tell me about this issue, how it originated, and what happened.
So this was a big piece of legislation that did a multitude of things, but really to drill down to this particular portion of it, the statute prior to the bill I passed and Act 2021-297 said really that the taxes and fees, etc., that were collected in the police jurisdiction had to be expended in the police jurisdiction really for the benefit of those folks from who it was collected. At least that was the idea behind the statute as it existed prior. What we tried to do was say, okay, fine, we're going to go with that premise, but we're going to ask you to just take a minute to fill out a one-page form and kind of demonstrate that that's actually happening. Mm-hmm. So we're going to ask you to show us how that is happening. So the one-page form basically said, look, how much are you collecting in the city? How much are you collecting outside of the city? And for instance, when we talk about police jurisdictions, what's the ratio of your calls volume? City, inside city, outside the city, and then what's your budget for your police department, for example, okay? And we thought from those few data points, we could say, yeah, this is pretty much within the realm. Now, the catch was you had to notify the department examiners that you collected money outside your municipal limits. And then further, that you had to file a report, that one-pager that I just went through, with the Department of Examiners, public examiners, so that you could demonstrate to us that you were doing what the statute said. And if you didn't notify and you didn't file the report, then you were no longer able to collect that money because you weren't demonstrating that you were doing what the statute had always said. And as you correctly point out, we had 128 municipalities around the state that we had at least some indication that they were exercising police jurisdiction, collecting those revenues, that simply did not either file that report or filed a notice and didn't file a report or didn't file a report at all. Mm-hmm. And so, effective last month, they're no longer able to collect any, and that's the word in the bill, any fines, fees, or taxes outside their municipal limits. And Todd, I'll be honest with you, I think it is probably, in effect, going to be one of the biggest tax cuts we've seen in Alabama history, just because those taxes are not going to be collected anymore.
Well, and based on Mary Sell's reporting, because she got in touch with a lot of these cities and towns that are losing that ability to tax. Some of them said, hey, we didn't want to bother with it anyway. We don't get that much, so we're just not going to fool with it. Others said, well, we didn't know, which was a surprise to some because there's been efforts through like the League of Municipalities to get the word out. Were you surprised to hear that some claim they didn't even know that was happening?
I was very surprised to hear that folks didn't know about this. I mean, look, this is a piece of legislation that I started with my first year in the legislature that took several years to get passed. That we worked on, again, for many years with many different interested parties. The League has got countless different conferences for, tax collectors, municipal clerk, municipal leaders, all of whom were very much aware of this bill and certainly lobbied on one way or the other on it. The Department of Revenue sent out notices. I mean, this has been something that if you go back and start Googling the number of news stories on this particular issue, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of them over the past year. So I just am not sure I buy that we didn't know about it. Now, I do think that maybe some folks just ignored it, missed the deadline. Again, the deadline was really a year ago with a 1-year grace period, just to be clear, an entire 12-month grace period. Or I think some of them may have done just the back of the napkin math and said, we can't justify what's happening here, and therefore we're just going to, as you say, we're going to give up on it and move on because we never were meeting the requirement of the statute previously.
Mm-hmm. And I've been asked real briefly what cities can do if they want to get it back, because it's not like, oh, well, just turn in the data after the deadline, just to do the report, and then you get your ability to tax back. It's done.
It is, and I think it's important to note again, there was a due date, and then there was a significant 1-year grace period, if you will, following the report's due date to file that and still have your ability to levy those taxes, fines, and fees. So I think there was certainly ample time between the bill's passage, the bill's effective date, and then the grace period being over. It was almost 20 months. Several budget periods elapsed, etc., to get this, again, very simple amount of data into the state.
Switching gears, I want to ask you about occupational licensing. It happens to be Sunset Day in the Senate, where all these boards and commissions, these things that regulate everything down from cosmetology to all different sorts of occupations. A lot of them have these boards that regulate, set up through statutes that y'all tend to reauthorize every so often. But this year, you've had legislation, and you and your colleagues have really shown the spotlight on a couple of these groups, these panels that you have some issues with and maybe don't need more careful scrutiny. Walk me through it.
Sure. So, as in my time here in the legislature, we've looked at different occupational licensing boards as they come through sunset, and then we've looked at different occupational licensing boards, frankly, as they have conflicts with each other. And we've noticed a problem. And I started looking at this back in the summer and found some old studies that had done by Troy and others where over 23% of the state's entire population, working population, is governed by one of these occupational licensing boards. And there are a couple of key issues. One, the cost of some of these occupational licenses, whether or not that's a barrier to entry in the workforce. We talk about workforce participation rates on a regular basis. Then you look at some protectionism, frankly, where you may have one board saying, we're the only ones that can do this, and you can't do it over there. We've seen that with some boards, especially in the construction field in particular, that kind of fight with each other over turf. And it's not just a matter of, hey, go pay your fee to get your license, but it's you can't do this unless you've done 3 or 4 of them under the supervision of, but you'll never be able to get under the supervision of because they don't want to expand the number of people that can do it. And that's just not really healthy for our economy. And then you run into others that are run by some of these private organizations that have very much a profit motive to them.
Oh, it's like a cottage industry.
It absolutely is, and there are people that are raking in millions off of it. And again, that all comes out of the workers that are just trying to cut hair or be a locksmith or a bail bondsman or whatever. So we looked at other states around us, how they were doing it, how they had gained some efficiency by the same person processing the license for a bail bondsman that may do it for a locksmith, and that those back office functions really had some synergies and some similarities, and you didn't need staff to do just one here and one there. And then you have separate real estate for each board, separate executive directors for each board, separate conference rooms for each board, and it was just like, this is a lot of duplication, and let's see if we can figure out a way to streamline this.
Well, do you think in the future we may see larger legislation, like more broad, to look at this? Is it going to take sort of a group of y'all to sit down and come up with a broader occupational licensing reform?
I think so, and the governor has an executive order on this, of course, as well.
The red tape thing.
Exactly, and I was already pretty far down this path when she issued that executive order, but I think that will be helpful moving forward. As you correctly point out, it's Sunset Day here. We'll be dealing with some sunset issues, and for your viewers, that's reauthorization, essentially, of these boards. We need to look at them and see, are they operating properly? Are they doing what the statute says? And if not, we can send the examiners, the auditors back in on a regular basis to look at them and see what they're doing. We're going to probably do that with some of these bills today, and then look at the broader picture as we move forward on occupational licensing in Alabama and whether or not this needs significant reform. I mean, Todd, I look at this as really one of the last vestiges of big government in Alabama is these duplicative boards and how we can probably streamline them, save taxpayers and small businesses a lot of money and a lot of headache.
Interesting issue. Well, before we go, I wanted to point out that it is the softball game night, the Battle of Goat Hill, House versus the Senate. You had that big hit last year at home plate that we aired and just got that video. Talk about the fun of the game, but also it's for a charitable purpose.
Well, it is for a charitable purpose, and it's to help the victims of tornadoes, specifically in the Selma area, and I'm glad that we're doing that. But it is a great opportunity for competition and camaraderie, and for the House and Senate to kind of have that get some of those competitive juices out of their system. It's a much better time to do that on the field than it is when we're trying to pass legislation. But it is fun. It's exciting. We get to pick back and forth with each other. And I was just down on the House floor a minute ago saying hi to my good friend Representative Reed Ingram, who we had a little collision with last time around. But all in good fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that transpires tonight.
Yeah, well, we invite everybody to come out. It's actually tomorrow night.
Oh, that's
Wednesday.
correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
This will air, and then we invite everybody to come out Wednesday night at Biscuit Stadium.
It's exciting.
Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back. Today is Future Farmers of America Day here at the Alabama Capitol. And joining me next is Raegan Rogers, State Treasurer of FFA Alabama. Raegan, thanks for coming on Capitol Journal.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I've seen all your blue coats around Goat Hill here in the State House and around the block. So has it been a fun day here at the Capitol? I understand you met the governor.
Yes, sir, we did. It's been a great day getting to meet everyone, just hear a little bit about everything that legislators are doing for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me more about FFA and your involvement. How did you first get involved as a student?
So I'm one of 10 kids. Whenever I was 2, my family started fostering, and we fostered around 50 kids and ended up adopting 6. So I have a very big family, and most of my family has always been involved in FFA. So I knew because of their involvement that I wanted to be involved, specifically in quartet, actually, which is a 4-person singing competition. So not what you think of when you think of FFA. But we actually didn't have a team that year for quartet, so I decided to be involved as an officer so that I could bring quartet and other competitions that we had dropped at our school back.
Oh, that's very interesting. And where's home?
Spring Garden.
Spring Garden, okay. I understand you're a freshman at Auburn.
Yes, sir.
Well, War Eagle to that.
War Eagle.
And what's your major?
My major is chemical engineering.
Now, you told me that earlier, and I thought that was really interesting because a lot of folks may assume that FFA students, go into agriculture type majors. Of course, chemical engineering can be applied in the agriculture sense, but how might you use that major?
I'm going to use the major for drug development and medicine research, but it can also be used for pesticides, GMOs, really anything that you can think of can be related to chemical engineering and agriculture.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that Future Farmers of America, it's just an enriching program, and it was, I guess, just last year I was talking to the Commissioner of Agriculture who had convinced the legislature for some funding mechanisms that would allow automatic enrollment for students who get into agri-science classes. I understand that's really benefited the ranks of FFA.
It has, yes, sir. So affiliate membership was passed by the state was in the budget from the state that allowed us to double our membership from 16,000 to 32,000 and just gives every student an opportunity to be involved in the organization. So we've already seen that. It's been evident in chapter activity, in competitions, in officer interviews, and we've been able to see the number of students really increase in what they can do because of this opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Well, what would you say to students or maybe parents of students who may be looking for extracurricular activities? Maybe FFA is a good opportunity. What would you say to them to encourage them to give it a try?
I would say to absolutely give it a try because FFA really has something for everything. We've already talked about how I want to go into chemical engineering and not necessarily the ag side. Mm-hmm. So that's a really big misconception that it's all about farming and agriculture. But there's also a lot of leadership and so many opportunities that people don't realize until they're involved. Mm-hmm. So it's the best to just take the step into it and see what's included and what opportunities there are before making a final decision.
Well, plus, the opportunity to come here to Montgomery, sometimes even Washington, D.C., to meet your your elected leaders. Have you been able to meet some of your own personal state representatives and senators?
So we've actually had Jenny Shaver come to several chapter meetings at Spring Garden, and that's such a great thing because we get to see who's representing us and really put a name to the face and just talk to her about all the things that we can do as advocates like her and all the things that she does for us.
Mm-hmm. Have you shared anything with these elected leaders about, your perspective on things and maybe the agricultural side of policy?
Personally, I haven't. One of the biggest things that I like to say is thank you to them because they've done the research and they talk to people who are very much more informed than I am. So I just say thank you to them for speaking up and being a voice for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, who knows? Maybe it won't be too long before we'll see your name on that board as one of these elected leaders.
Maybe so.
Well, Raegan, this has been fun. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Good luck in school, and again, War Eagle.
War Eagle. Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at 10:30 with more coverage of the Alabama Legislature right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd State Sen. We'll see you next time.